Welcome to the Top M&A Entrepreneurs. Today I have a guest, Chris Bentley. He's a Marine, and he's also the author of this book called Burning Bellatorium. It is the story of a $40 million fraud and its priceless lessons for investors. So welcome thanks for joining me, Chris. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on your show, John. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so you and I connected on LinkedIn. I saw that I put out a message looking for deal flow, talking about deal flow, and you pinged me, and we had a couple conversations, and now we're talking here. So you were the CEO of a company called Bellatorium, which sold oil and gas leases. And what happened there? Can you kind of summarize what?
Yeah. So, in a nutshell, I started a mineral rights and royalties acquisitions firm. And our first few years were very successful. And in 2019, we hit some operational internal, challenges that affected our deal flow. And that's why I think relevant topic for your podcast. And as things, to try to keep the lights on and buy some time, I started telling lies. And then eventually that, got into more than just ethical violations, and then more into legal, criminal activity where I was, doctoring balance sheets and financial statements and actual transactional documents to try to keep the lights on at the company. And, just eventually got to a point where, I was like, I need to just come clean about this, or, basically relegate myself to a life of lying and unethical behavior, which, and I think, what I chose, and I came clean. But, in essence, what I thought was neat about your show and all that is, being in the acquisitions, investment management space, deal flow is everything. Off-market deals, the price you pay for the deals. And that's kind of when I let that was our bread and butter when we were wildly successful, is getting those off-market deals and generating that deal flow. And I thought, wow, that's, John's show is like, it's very relevant to our story. And I don't really talk about that, just the deal flow aspect in the book in great detail, but it's very relevant, because had we had our shit together on a deal flow front, I probably wouldn't even be here today. So,
yeah, the part where you said you had issues with deal flow, it sounded like it just, well, I got the names wrong, I got the prices wrong, and some of the packages, the paperwork was sent to the wrong people. What happened there? Was it people, the systems in place, or, you talked about General Mattis's flat ass rules. Yeah. What can you tell me about that?
Well, so the first part of your question, John, was, about the deal flow, right? Like the operational aspect of it. All right. And where things went wrong there was just not paying attention to that, right? And when you run any business, you have challenges, especially when you're a new business and you're growing, right? You've got these challenges. Well, what I think I failed to give proper attention to was just how important that deal flow was to our success. And so when I was allocating my time and energy and effort into where do I put the most effort into my business, I thought that because we had been so successful with sending out these mailers and generating the deal flow, getting the referral system in place, that, hey, I've got that, right? Let me focus on these other areas. And so I neglected that. I neglected making sure that there was just a codified, solid data management system, the data that fed the letters and the outbound marketing, right? And so by virtue of neglecting that, I thought it was, hey, it's being done properly, whatever. We'll come to find out whatever new data set we had fed and whatever, it was improper, right? So when I to fast forward to your question about the flat ass rules, I feel like, hindsight's always 2020. Look, but if I can tell any new entrepreneur or fund manager or mergers and acquisitions guy, like, deal flow is everything, right? You've got to, and generating deal flow. Look, I had a lot of deal flow by people sending me deals, brokers and people. Hey, I got this deal, right? Those aren't good deals because they've already been marked up. People have gotten their fingers on them and everything. Deal flow is generating the off-market deal flow out there, shaking the trees, finding stuff that nobody else has access to. That's what we were really good at in 2017, 2018, and where we built our track record. Well, because I neglected that part of the business, then come in 2019, now I've got $22.7 million and no quality deal flow. So what do I start doing? Start buying bad deals that I can't flip for a margin or that I can't monetize, in the way that I had planned to execute the strategy. And so, when you talk about flat ass rules with General Mattis, I mean, to take it back to the military thing, what his flat ass rules were like certain things, like you always have a guardian angel on any patrol you're on. That means that Overwatch, right? Like you don't just go walking down the streets of Fallujah without, a guardian angel, as we called it, up on the rooftops watching, moving with you in a place where they have a better field of vision than you. Well, that's one flat ass rule, right? So take that and equate it to business. In my situation with Bellatorum, I could have said, hey, if there's no deal flow, the flat ass rule is to stop. Doesn't matter what the situation is. If you didn't generate the deal yourself, no go, right?
That's saying hindsight. And hindsight. Yeah.
But look, I already screwed up. But I hope that if there's an entrepreneur or fund manager or an investor listening to your show, that they can say, look, I hope my fund manager or my investment strategy has some flat rules, because those are, I think a lot of times as capitalists and entrepreneurs, we may think like, oh, rigidity or rigid rules, those are bad. They're bureaucratic. We're anti-rigidity and flat ass rules, right? But sometimes, especially when you're managing other people's money and your success depends on, arbitrage and finding the good deal, you need to have those flat rules. And like avoiding loss and making money are two, very highly consequential things that you need to,
well, let me ask you about that deal flow. Was it what changed about the deal flow? Why did it go down? And you felt like you had to go to these on-market deals. Was it a change in economics, like the industry up and down, or what was it?
So it was a little bit of both. We did not. I had operated. Bellatorum was not a business in 2014 and 2015, but I was in the industry, and those were bad years for oil and gas, right? 2015 was. 2014 prices were high, but I was still able to make a really good living playing in the mineral space in 2014 when prices were high. And then even in 2018, when prices began to fall really low, in 2016 even, right? So the economy part, a bad industry, so to speak, is not an excuse, because as long as you're finding deals out there, it's all about the price you pay at the right time, right? And our marketing machine of getting these letters out, these very personalized letters with the correct salutation, the correct property that we're trying to buy. So for example, John, if let's say you own mineral rights in Midland, Texas, but I sent you a letter that said, "Dear Mrs. Stoddard, I would like to buy your mineral rights in Glasscock County, Texas." You'd be like, who are these clowns, right?
Tear it up and throw it in the trash, right?
Right.
It's just a form.
Those are little crucial details that were getting messed up because I didn't make sure the data was proper. And then the amount of letters that go out and the time they go out is also important. So if you're sending bad letters out, it's a total wash anyway, right? That's deal breaker one. But let's say you're sending, good letters out, but you only send 500 of them out. That's still a problem. So
well, let me ask you about that. I don't know anything about the oil and gas and the mineral. Why is it a bad timing?
Well, no, it was great timing to send, but not if you didn't send them out. Like January, that was kind of one of my points that I think I talk about in the book is, if you send letters out, at least in my experience in the industry, if you send your letters out literally right before Christmas, snail mail, they'll get there right after Christmas and people will start like, okay, I could get some money I could sell these assets that I own and get some money to pay, because I've got buyer's remorse on my expensive ski vacation and all the money I spent on these Christmas gifts. Like, let me monetize one of my assets and sell it to Bellatorum. So it had been my experience always that January was a crucial month to generate the deal flow so that we could buy assets, off-market assets, for very cheap in January. So that's unique to my story, right? To my industry and asset class that I was in. But the same concept could have applied to anything. Like if you're in housing, real estate, then maybe it's March or April.
Right before interest rates go up, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to borrow money, right?
But you have to have your deal flow and marketing machine, whipped. I'll give you an example. One of my friends, another veteran, he is in the private equity space wanting to buy small businesses, right? And so his marketing strategy to generate deal flow is much different, but it's still extremely important. You don't want to go to a business broker that has already taken his cut, marketing this thing out to everybody. If you want to buy an off-market business, go out and look for small mom and pop businesses where the owner operator, there's things you need to find. The owner operator is ready to retire, monetize, they're in the business. So there's room for you, there's scalability. You got to say, all right, hey, there's this 70-year-old guy selling, widgets in Main Street, USA. But what he doesn't have is a social media presence. He doesn't have a search engine optimized website, blah, 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 right? So if you're a private equity guy looking to buy small businesses, your deal flow generation is going to be different, but still it's extremely important because it's all about the price you pay at what time, right?
Yeah, and I love the way you say that asymmetric information, you're knowing that he doesn't have this, that this, which could lead to another $1 million of top line or bottom line, whatever it is, just doing what you're good at. Interesting. I do have to ask this. I know this is just fresh. I'm talking 2021. Are you talking about anything that your attorneys are say, don't talk about, don't say, or?
No. So look, this is a unique situation. I don't know if anybody's ever done what I've done, but I wasn't being investigated. There was no case that, nobody was knocking at my door. I went and turned myself in. And in doing so, and in writing the book, I'm an open book. I know that's a cliche, but you can ask anything you want. I have nothing to hide. I'm just waiting. My attorney cringes when he hears me talk. He says, look, I'm not wired to have my client out saying anything and everything they want. But the one thing I think to answer your question is my attorney is not a defense attorney. I literally hired him to just help me kind of understand the process. There's no 1-800 Crime Stoppers or call 911 for my situation, right? Like I didn't even know who to turn myself into. So the reason I hired the attorney was just to help me. Hey, who do I call? So this white collar attorney that I hired here in Houston, he knew exactly who to call, set up the meeting. And then he's basically there to help me like, hey, all right, here's what you can expect. When you go to sentencing, here's how you talk to the judge or because you need that, I think, but I'm not paying for a defense. Like he's not out there doing legal research to see how he can get me less of a sentence. I'm willing to accept whatever, God has in store for me.
And you're just waiting for them to come back with, hey, this is what you've done. These are the charges, and this is the max sentence, whatever it is. punishment.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally out of my hands, out of his hands. It's all in the hands of the feds and the sorry. Let me
We all have dogs. My dog happens to be at the park right now. Yeah.
So just one sec. Is this live or are we?
Yeah, it's not live. No, it's recorded.
So do you edit it at all?
Not much, but we'll do that with this. I mean, I like to put these out there, and it's just a live. It's not a live conversation, but it's real. It's genuine, authentic. And people get interrupted by, their wife comes in or the dog or baby comes in. That's cool. I mean, it gets more views.
Yeah. All right. Well, so I have curtains, supposedly soundproof curtains up over my office door. It's one of those glass French doors.
Yeah, get your money back on that.
Yeah, seriously.
Let me go back to the instance. So you obviously done a lot of research on how people psychologies are when they do commit fraud, because you talked about this fraud triangle, MICE, which just stands for money, ideology, coercion, and ego, and the last one, which is ABC, apple, bushel, bad crop, where the fraud triangle is, there's three parts. There's pressure, the kind of individual feels compelled to private, opportunity, and justification. So when those letters went out in January, did you feel the pressure that you didn't make the time cycle to do that and you may have lost the year or what?
No, not at all. So I thought we could recover. I thought it was and I think I talk about this in the book. The first thing that happened was like, okay, hey, I realized the letters didn't go out and they needed, so I got, rallied the troops, everybody, hey, we're not going home today until we get this many letters out and this and this and this, right? So kind of got the team on board and we sent letters out. Meanwhile, keep in mind, I've got people sending me millions of dollars daily, like they had signed the documents and everything. And so, I didn't.
These are your investors, right? That are signed. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
and you continually raise money throughout it. Right.
I had raised money in the last quarter of 2018, right? So all the agreements are signed and in place. And meanwhile, I've got my team, hey, getting ready. We've got this money. They're selling the assets that we owned in 2018. So everything was a fresh start in 2019. So we did that, sold the assets, accomplished all that, the 2018 assets. Onboarded so in January of 2019, I'm onboarding new investors, receiving wires in the bank every day for their their investments, and then realize, I get one of my guys come up to me and like, hey, we only got whatever 1,000 letters out, and I don't remember what the number was, but I was like, really, why? Like, we need to get these letters out, right? And then I also realized that in those 1,000 letters, there was mistakes. And then we were like peeling back the onion. And I was like, whoa, this data is wrong. Like, I can just tell by, spot checking line items that, there's these, whatever, there's mistakes on this data set. So it was like, hey, you guys fix the data. You guys prep the letters. Let's get them out. So, I thought, okay, crisis averted. We get, I think like 5,000 letters out in a week and thought it was good. Well, something had happened during the merge of the going from Excel to Word and something. So then those 5,000 letters out that we sent out were also incorrect.
Was it you tried to do that internally and didn't outsource it to somebody? Or yeah,
correct. We did it internally, and that was also kind of one of our secret sauce previously, was that our letters were, we hand wrote notes on all the letters and I signed them all personally. Like these are, so I ended up eventually getting myself a stamp. So I didn't, my arthritis was kicking in, but it looked like a real signature on all the letters. We tri-folded them and put them in normal envelopes or, so it didn't look like junk mail. So that was a tedious, time consuming process. Well, so then again, this goes, if you're asking about the details of going down this thing, right? Like where it starts to get murky,
Going off rails a little bit. Yeah, there.
outside the guardrails, big time, so no deal flow. My investors, the way I was set up, I had some bit of transparency with the bank account. Some investors were like, hey, Chris, this isn't like last year. Some of the investors that had been with me in the previous, they're like, why is the money still sitting in the account? We see there's no transactions happening. We just see all this money, this $22 million just sitting there. Why aren't you putting it to work?
So your investors had transparency on your bank accounts?
On the fund bank account, not all my, not my operating account where I pay payroll and stuff, but where the money went for the fund, they could see it right at first. And anyway, so I started, at that moment, I should have probably said, hey, look, I'm just making sure that we put the money to work properly. And we've had a few deals that were, I could have probably, without lying, still held off for a little bit. Right. But instead, what I did was, oh shit, man, like what do I do? So first thing I do is buy some deals, that I had, and I paid probably market value, which is not our business model. Right. So that was kind of the first baby step one, is to pay market value. I'll give you an example, like, a net royalty acre, you talk about buying land or whatever. I probably paid $10,000 a net royalty acre for these deals that were, and I still had margin in them, but it wasn't the margin we were used to, but it was still only a small. So that was my first step. So I think I bought like maybe $1 million worth of deals out of the 22 by paying that fee. And that was starting in February. And then it was like still getting these, dude, you've only put $1 million to work. Like last year, you deployed all our capital within like 45 days. What's going on here? So then I start buying deals. I bought a deal less than arm's length because I knew I could control it. Right. Like I moved those. So anyway, I just still nothing criminal yet. I think the first criminal thing I did was in May of 2019. And that's because I had run out of operating capital. Normally we had flipped stuff by then and I was able to take a profit and fund my payroll. So in May of 2019, I told the investors there was a $6 million deal when really it was a 5.6. I think, don't hold me to these numbers, but basically I made it look like the transaction was more. And I took that amount and moved it into my operating account via like a series of transactions. So it wouldn't be obvious, using broker fees and all these other, and I was doctoring up the documents to make everything kosher so that, because we did have oversight with a third party administrator stuff. So I lied to them. I lied to the escrow agent, all this to get that money back to Bellatorum so I could pay the payroll with it. So that was the first criminal thing I did. And I thought, look, I could, it's no big deal. Like I can flip all these assets and I'll pay it back and nobody will ever know. Right.
Yeah.
So,
let me kind of bring up something, that study where you place a kid in an isolated room, 5-year-old, and you put a cupcake in and you tell them, hey, don't eat the cupcake. And the majority of them do, they can't help themselves. I mean, what was the part you just said, I'm just going to eat the cupcake? Like, why do you think you did that?
Well, I mean,
was it the pressure that,
Yeah, but I think it's more than the cupcake analogy, John. I mean, you think I wasn't going and taking a cupcake for myself, right? Like I had employees there was a lot that went into my mind. And so I think as humans, sometimes we try to oversimplify reason and logic, right? But there was a lot of things. I had wildly successful business that was on an upward successful trajectory. I had a long-term vision for like our software development and everything. And it was like, what the fuck? All this is, excuse my language, is falling apart because of a hiccup. Like can't go out this way, right? So that's ego, right? That's ego or hubris, whatever. There's that. But I cared for my employees. I had these veterans. I had a guy that moved from Virginia, two guys that moved from Louisiana, a guy that moved from Arkansas. I had these team members that had moved to work for me from around the country, and they literally sold their houses and moved their families and wife and kids. And I'm like, wow, now I mean, really,
you're beholden to them somehow. Like,
yeah, I mean, I felt like I was, right? I think a lot of people might have said, well, screw it. Like, I mean, I even had one of my friends like, why'd you do that? Like, who cares about them? You got to, like, why'd you do all this? You put yourself at risk and you did all this. And, and then the industry started going down in mid 2019, and then COVID came, and it was like, and I kept digging a deeper and deeper hole. And all the while I thought, I always had a plan of how I could make everybody whole and still not do wrong by anybody. Like even the final investors, right? That would have I would have brought in a large capital commitment, but even them, I had a plan for how to make them profitable as well. But then it was just like, and I think I told you this on the phone when we were talking about this, is like this whole thing, all my success would have been built on lies, or some part of it at the end. And I couldn't have lived with that,
Yeah. Well, so that last fund you tried to raise like $100 million and you only brought in a couple million. What happened there? Was it the economic situation?
Yeah. So that one was definitely about timing and targets, right? Like meaning, trying to raise money during an election year with the negative oil and gas. I mean, oil and gas.
Oh yeah, you can't mail stuff out during election year. I've done that before, and it just gets lost.
Anyway. Well, yeah, I mean, my capital raising efforts were not mail. For the most part, it was out, but people weren't having in-person conferences as much, and and meetings, like getting my meetings were very difficult. Towards the end, once people were starting to go back to their offices and talk about investing. I mean, you remember 2020 was a dumpster fire. Like
it was. I mean, like nobody's going to pay taxes. Got to figure out how to do this. Yeah.
So trying to raise capital in 2020 was just a nightmare. But I started towards the end of the year. Some people were starting to be like, "Hey, you know what? I can't sit on the sidelines anymore." And this is what I was alluding to: is like I could have kept going for a few more months and probably got $100 million in. That. The lies I was having to tell, the pressures to keep the thing going, and the lies were just, you got to think once I got to that point, everything was a lie. Literally telling my kids, they're like, "Hey Dad, how was your day?" I'm like, "Oh, it was fantastic." Like trying to be positive and upbeat for them. That's a lie. Right. Telling my wife, like, making small talk, everything, just every ounce of my energy to try to be positive and be this CEO of a business that's supposed to look like it's doing good, doing well. My whole being was a lie. The smile on my face, the just everything. Right. Like,
do you have, I'm just curious. I mean, FBI investigators are skeptical by nature. So do they have a reason to believe you're telling the truth now? And do you have like a champion that said, well, he's come clean. He's fighting for me?
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I handed over all my computers. I mean, we're supposed to be the most advanced nation in the world with the most qualified. I mean, look, I was in the Marines for 14 and a half years, and I've seen what our capabilities are. And the Marines are like usually the least equipped branch of the military. And I know that we have some pretty sophisticated technology. I got out in December of 2013. So one has to assume it's even better nowadays. I mean, if I'm not holding anything back, I literally handed over my cell phone, my computers, my, all the bank accounts, all the statements, and told them exactly what I did. And so if they're skeptical, I mean, it's not, I don't know what
you can't, you've bared face to everyone. Yeah.
it's,
You know,
and
what
it's,
about the employees? I mean, there's some people that you formed relationships with. I mean, are they accepting of it? Are they understanding? Are they moving on?
I think a few are accepting of it, and they, a couple actually like appreciate, have, just two have told me, hey, I know, thank you for not throwing me to the wolves in the middle of 2020. Like, how could I go from making $120,000 a year in 2020 to the federal, that COVID relief of, you can't go from being an oil and gas professional and then to making $4,000 a month on unemployment. Like, everybody is like, oh, why did they had all this unemployment? And what, like, okay, that works if you work at Starbucks or Chick-fil-A or something, maybe, but to go from making six figures to $4,000 a month with a wife and kids to support, you just don't, that doesn't work for people. I mean, that's life-changing, right? Like, in a negative way, life-changing, and so that was what I was thinking. And so to answer your question more directly, yes, I've had a couple be like, hey, you put the company on your back. I mean, by the way, I lost my house. I sold I made my wife sell her vehicle too. Like, she had a nice Toyota, SUV, told her to sell that. I sold my truck. I put that money in the company to pay payroll. And then, so it was like, I think one thing a lot of readers and people don't understand from the outside looking in, and maybe even employees, is like, yes, I committed fraud and it doesn't make it okay. I lost, I lied to make a lot of this happen, but I wasn't just putting other people's money at risk. I put my entire life and livelihood at risk to keep this thing going. And my wife didn't know what I was doing, but she also made sacrifices. Like, I said, hey, I need to sell your car. I'll get you a little cheaper car. We can share a car for a while. Like, we actually shared a car, but I bought a little cheap truck and got her a used vehicle, and we sold those vehicles, and I was able to, I mean, it was literally just a Band-Aid, but I thought it could buy.
When did you tell your wife?
When?
Yeah.
Oh, she got the email with everybody else. She was sitting at a soccer game, sitting next to one of our largest investors who their grandson is best friends with my son. And she got the email like everybody else. So I didn't know how else to tell. Like, I didn't want her to be, at all at fault for what I did. So she never could know anything. Right. And so that was, people are like, surely your wife knew, or your best friend there, somebody had to know. And I was like, how could I tell anybody this? How could I, anyway, I mean, people who say that I can't empathize with them, because I don't have those type of relationships where I would feel okay going, hey man, let me tell you, I'm committing fraud right now. What do you think I should do? Like, who do you tell that to besides maybe a pastor or a lawyer or a psychologist? I don't know, but yeah. So she found out via email.
Yeah. And she was, I hate to say this, but close to divorce for not revealing that, or yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the first few months I was couch surfing, like, I went and stayed with some relatives in East Texas. Then I went to Florida to stay with some relatives, and, just not knowing what was going to happen. I was letting the FBI know this, obviously, like, hey, I need to go here. And, we're together now. We are renting the upstairs of her parents' home. And, she's working, and our life is definitely much, much different now. And there's a lot of uncertainty. But to her credit, she's still with me. I don't know. It's not like that's a guarantee, right? She says, you can say one thing, but if I get sentenced to 25 years in prison, like, that might change, so.
Yeah. Well,
And
what is the, I'm sure you've looked into that for fraud and white collar crime. What is the sentence for?
so, I mean, the range is extremely ridiculous. Like it could be probation at the best case scenario, or 25 years at the worst case, because of the dollar amount, the number of investors affected, so, and my lawyer says it's unlikely they would do this, but technically they could stack it. So if they charge me with multiple crimes, and let's say each of them has a max sentence of 25, like our
On top of each other.
yeah. So that, I guess that could be my worst case scenario, is the rest of my life in prison. And I know there's a few investors that have said they think I deserve that. I mean, the investors that I still talk to, there's a WhatsApp group that they all have to communicate, like who's suing me or who and whatever. And they've said, hey man, look, this guy thinks you should spend the rest of your life in prison, or this person thinks that
so they're trying to sue you, but you can't get water from a rock or blood from a turnip. I mean, what?
Well, that's the thing. Only a couple of people have sued me, and maybe it's just so that they were first to the punch in any sort of possible restitution. But yeah, I'm surprised that I haven't been sued by every investor, or some sort of class action lawsuit against me. I mean, the investors that did sue me, I didn't fight it. I signed it. I said, I'm not, you got a default judgment against me, and I'm not going to lie. Like, yeah, I committed fraud, and you can sue me for that. You can sue me for the damages or losses you incurred. And I won't fight it. Like, so.
Is this a federal case or a local state district attorney case?
As of right now, it's federal, but they haven't done anything, so I don't know.
So there's no federal agent calling you, asking you questions.
Well, yeah. So I have, the last time I had a meeting was with the SEC and the Department of Justice in March. And, I still don't know what's going to happen. Like I don't know what the charges are going to be. I don't know anything. I sent them an email the other day that said, hey, I'm willing to face anything. I'm not asking you for a plea bargain. Like, all I'm asking you for is some idea of the path forward, and like, can we get the show on the road, basically. And no response. I mean, I never get a response. I've sent them several emails over the last year and some change, but hey, I mean, I don't know what to do, as far as that's concerned. Like I said, it's mainly for my wife and kids to give them some closure, is like the selfish part of that. And then for the investors too, I mean, they deserve some sort of justice, like to know that the legal system is working on their behalf, and in a lot of their eyes, from what the comments I've seen on that WhatsApp group, is they feel like, wow, you can just get away with fraud and you're out still enjoying freedom.
Yeah. Now, this book that you wrote, and it's published like one at a time through Amazon. I mean, did you have a fund set up for the investors to recoup, or?
Well, yeah. So all the proceeds will go to the investors. I just set up a separate bank account that I'm not accessing. I mean, technically, if I wanted to, I guess I could access it, but I've actually given one of the investors view access to the account so that they can see I'm not touching it. And so all the proceeds from the book will get, the Amazon will direct deposit to that account, and I'm just going to leave the money in that account, and the investors or the feds or whoever, can manage it how they see appropriate. But, I'm not going to touch it.
Yeah. Curious, as the last half of your book is kind of putting checks and balances in place for something to be like a cautionary tale for the next person to happen. And as many checks and balances you put into place, it still seems to happen. People do that because we're imperfect human beings. What was the intention of doing this? Is this a kind of like that guy that used to write bad checks, catch me if you can, to say, I mean, that guy ended up making millions of dollars per year teaching corporations how to look for bad checks.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, the main focus, like the main reason for this book was to try to help a way to make the investors whole, right? Well, you can't just write a book and assume that it'll sell. There has to be actually valuable information in there for people to buy it, right? So I feel personally that the lessons in here are valuable and actionable for investors and entrepreneurs. If you know the second half of the book, or maybe the 2/3, if you will, there's a part for investors and then there's a part for managers or entrepreneurs, right? And those rules, I think, you're never going to create a perfect scenario in any situation ever, right? If you're playing sports, if you're doing whatever, there's always, but the more boundaries, the more difficult you can make it for yourself or others to get, to color outside the line, so to speak, then the better. Like for me, every case is different, but in mine, like a way that would have kept me from being able to do this, or at least made it extremely difficult, would have been timings after wires went out, right? Like if a wire went out, I better have had paperwork to show the validity of that wire transfer within an hour, right? Like even within an hour would have, and to know if I'm the one that's orchestrating this whole thing and I'm keeping it in silos. I mean, the way I did that is sometimes, I'm out busy, right? So I can send a wire from my phone, but I can't doctor a PDF document from my phone. So like if I'm flying to New York, sitting at the airport, and I send a wire out, I just tell my third-party administrator, hey, I'm out of the office. I'll fax you, or I'll scan and email you that paperwork on Saturday, right? Then I go into the office Saturday morning and do my dirty work when nobody's in the office, and email all the people, hey, sorry, I was traveling this week, blah, 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 right? Well, if I would have not had that liberty to do that, and that's on me, I want to make it clear. It's not the third-party administrator's fault. It's not the escrow agent's fault. It's nobody.
Yeah, that's that opportunity in that triangle.
Yeah. So, but if I would have put the boundaries on myself, then, and once it's in an operating document, that's what you have to follow. And you can do that to yourself, right? It may be uncomfortable at first, like, man, am I handcuffing my ability to operate? But you can know now, readers can read this story and say, hey, if I'm messing, if there's any potential for nefarious means, then let me put some boundaries on that. You don't need to put boundaries on something as like, hey, do I buy in Glasscock County or Midland County? I mean, like, you don't want to put too much red tape on the way you operate your business. But when it comes to financial and other people's money and investment reporting, I mean, absolutely. Or if it's filing your taxes or your payroll stuff, like anything that, if you're operating a business, you need to put some boundaries on anything that could go awry and potentially put you in a precarious position,
Yeah. What does that say about the individual to say that we need to put it? Because is it, you know how to cheat or steal because you've been cheated or stolen on?
Well, you brought up the point earlier, right, about the fraud triangle. And, look, good people make bad decisions all the time. So it's not as simple as, oh, you're a thief and you're not. Like, you can leave, you get a good person that your whole life, like, you never would have thought this person would even consider picking up $100 bill off the ground and not running after the person in front of them and saying, hey, you dropped this, right? But there's people, you never know, if the stars align and they're late on their rent and things are bad, they just got laid off, they may put that $100 bill in their pocket and go buy groceries for their family, right? And kind of same thing, like, you never know what your circumstances are going to be in the future, right? You have no idea. I didn't know that the industry was going to go. I didn't know when I came back that I was going to have a deal flow problem. I didn't know the industry was going to go down in 2019. I didn't know that COVID was going to come. if I would have had in case of emergency, break glass kind of boundaries in place, and that's what I was forced to do, we wouldn't be sitting here today, John. Like it, and I think those are important to govern yourself. I mean, the Stoics all talked about it. The Bible talks about it. I mean, no matter what your religious or, moral philosophy is, in history, there's so many examples of human beings putting boundaries on themselves because they didn't know how they do things. It's just like, if you're a married man, maybe you don't want to go hanging out with single women, right? You just don't even put yourself in that position, like in an intimate setting, right? Like we talked about that in my Bible study recently, and it was like, you just don't put yourself in positions where you can make bad decisions. Maybe if you want to test yourself, but like, why even go through that, right?
Well, I also think there's a part, Seneca talks about Stoicism, the premeditation of evils. Like, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Something that was going through your head, like, oh my God, shit is going to be worse if I don't fix this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that.
And you fixed it how you thought.
Right. Well, it ended up failing at fixing it, but I absolutely thought that the outcome I was shooting for was going to be much better than if I had said, hey guys, I've already spent some of your money, but here's the rest of it back. And I shut down my business and lay off the employees and all those things, right, that I should have done in, let's call it February of 2019 or January of 2019. We could argue about exactly which step would have been the right time to break the glass and, say, hey guys, sorry, we're done here. But, it was, I thought that the better solution was to try to figure out a way to make it work, to make it successful. So,
obviously you're an entrepreneur and now you have a strong duty to make it right. I'm curious, what's next? Like, is it a movie, Netflix movie, or what?
I don't know. Would this be a movie that you'd watch on Netflix?
I think they could do it. They're so hungry for content that one of those channels, HBO or whatever, could do it.
Yeah, I mean, it would be, if that would be a way. I mean, look, 40 million. I just learned last week that like the SEC is separate from the FBI and the investors, right? So
yeah,
I know I owe the investors, let's call it $40 million, right? That number could actually be different because there were actually real assets in some of the entities, and there's royalty income being produced from the oil and gas that was being produced. So, but let's just call it $40 million. Well, then the SEC, from what I learned last week, is they have a number that they're saying, hey, those losses, those are just losses. You don't, we're going to say you owe 9 million because that was the fraudulent or criminal or the, wrong activity was $9 million. So you owe $9 million to the investors, but hey, we're also going to fine you $9 million. And so that's on top of it. So then now I'm going to owe the SEC $9 million and the investors $9 million from the SEC, but then there's going to be the judgments and the liens. So, from what my lawyers told me is like, hey, it could be 50 or 60 million dollars that you owe every, total. And so to answer your question, I fully intend to at least making an effort to try to pay that back. And so that's going to take something like a movie or an invention or something that can be sold widely. And I have some ideas, but I got to know what the path forward is, because if they're going to put me in prison for 25 years, then I won't be able to execute that plan.
So what do you do? This is my last question. What are you doing to, lighten the burden of your guilt? How do you stay to your family and child?
Well, I mean, I'm, in a way, this has been from a spending time with my kids standpoint. This last year has been better than any previous year. I drive them to school every morning. I get to go to more of their soccer games. I mean, I just recently quit the job I was working, and not quit, like just quit for no reason, like, because I thought that I was going to be moving forward with the case. I'd gotten a phone call. I was the general manager of a thrift store, so I didn't want to leave them, hey, I'm gone all of a sudden. So I trained my replacement, and then thinking that I'm, going to have official charges coming any day now and start to move this process forward. Well, and then now it's been crickets, and that was like about a month ago. So I already trained my replacement. He's there. He took over. So now I'm going to be looking for work again, I guess. But it's hard to find employment when this is hanging over your head, because a lot of the people, they're like, hey, we're not judging you. We're willing to hire you, but not in anything meaningful if we don't know what, you're going to go to jail.
Yeah. Well, I'm referring to spiritually, actually.
Oh, I mean, to lighten the guilt, I mean, I think coming clean was a big, I feel guilty. I still feel guilty. Don't get me wrong, but it's not a debilitating feeling of guilt anymore. I've come clean. I've done everything I can. Now it's in the hands of the feds. And so, and it's not having to tell a lie is a huge weight lifted off, my shoulder. I joke with my wife and say, hey, I'm never telling a lie again. So do not ask me if those green colored jeans you like to wear look good on you, because I don't think they do, and I'm not going to tell you they do, so
well, there's white lies, right? It's like,
yeah.
Does that make me look fat?
But
Chris, I want to thank you for spending time with me, top M&A entrepreneurs. I mean, this is a cautionary tale of building a business, acquiring leases, $40 million fraud, and this is open. I mean, you're at any moment somebody calls you up and you're gonna hear some kind of information that could say, hey, this is, I could do it, or oh my God, it's yeah. I want to thank you, man. I want to thank you.
Thanks for having me on, John. I appreciate it. I hope your listeners will buy the book and help towards the restitution efforts, and leave some reviews, honest reviews. I'd like to hear some feedback. We just launched I think about a month ago. So exactly a month ago. So, getting some more reviews and feedback would be great.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
All right. Cheers.